The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. There is a dangerous phase in depth psychology where you have seen through most or many of your illusions. You have understood how much of your own conditioning has guided your entire life and how much you have lied to yourself. And it feels like you have seen through the illusions of ordinary human society, but now you feel absolutely useless. Becoming harmless through intense spiritual practice is a common problem. Harmlessness is similar to uselessness. Now that you've seen through the illusion of life, you actually don't care anymore. Everything is empty, and all motivations that were fueled by the ego to become somebody special now seem meaningless. And in this meaninglessness, there might also be the sense that you must always be compassionate, that you're not supposed to be overly aggrandizing, that all desire for power or fame or success or ambition is all ego and material stuff and should therefore be rejected. This makes you into a useless human being, and it creates a society where everybody who has deep spiritual insight goes to the backseat, and everybody who is power hungry and ego driven and only wants to take resources from others and take them upon themselves will rule the world. Spiritual realization is not useful if it makes people docile. Docile is what we already have going on. The belief that we cannot challenge the powers in our own life, that we believe that there are some higher powers above us that tell us what we must do, and we are powerless to confront ourselves against them. And this works both in the macro as some sort of like the political elites, but also in the micro, like your family members. Each of those have certain expectations, and you believe that these expectations will always be met. This is how you give powerful people their power, by believing that their power is real. Now, if you say their power isn't real and it's all this fantastical illusion, and you see how the ego constructs this power play, then what it causes is that you don't want to play this game anymore. You withdraw yourself from the game and then believe that power as something that you can acquire doesn't actually exist. It leaves you in a life of powerlessness and emptiness. There is so much power in this world to attain, and it requires you to not be harmless. You cannot cause change in your own life if you are not willing to hurt people, if you're not willing to hurt whatever system is in place. If you never want to be confrontational, if you don't argue, if you don't put on your own boundaries, if you don't tell the truth, if you don't say what you actually want, if you don't disappoint people, if you don't disappoint people in your own failures, then nothing is going to change. And true spiritual wisdom will lead you to a place that these things that I've just listed become easier to do, not more difficult. It is the ego that makes these things difficult, because the ego is always worried about its own survival and its own lack of control. Once you've seen through the illusion of control that, the ego has clinged towards, now you can see where real control lies, and it still exists. You are free when you are not behind bars. If you are in a place where you can move around freely, you have money, and you can speak your mind and follow the actions that you have spoken, then you are actually free. Then you have real power. This mechanic, or the system behind how this works, doesn't actually disappear. Only because you can see that all human striving is vanity doesn't mean that the vanity hasn't had actual consequences. And it also doesn't mean that just because you are also wanting wealth, power, fame, freedom, that it necessarily means that it comes from a place of vanity. It might come from a place of genuinely wanting a nice life, genuinely wanting to have more impact. Awakening is incomplete if you don't feel like it is fueling your own aliveness. And for a lot of faces, this is extremely normal. And everybody's journey is a bit different. So if you are somebody who already has a lot of success in their life, then it becomes quite normal that through an awakening experience, all these attachments drop away. And if you were a violent person, if you were aggressive, or if you were overly assertive, then awakening will likely put this back a few notches and maybe completely eliminate it for a while. There's no reason to keep fueling the system that made you be in this way. And a lot of entrepreneurs are then scared that they will forever lose their drive. And this isn't the case. What you lose is the engine that was built on a fake foundation and therefore has created a fake drive. But oftentimes there's a part of it that is key and always true. And it will be true beyond and before realization. That there's no difference in who you actually are as a person if there's something that you sincerely always wanted. That's how I'm able to manage my business while honestly being quite detached from all outcomes. If you want to understand how to gain deeper access to the state of frictionless ambition, then check out my one-on-one ego architecture audit in the link in the description. Harmlessness is seen often as like a virtue. And the reason for this is that the existential realization of oneness makes it so that you cannot really win against a person anymore. There's no hierarchy anymore that makes you better than anybody because, you're just the entirety of the human system. If you lose your sense of self, then who cares what you gain, right? Like, it could be anybody who gains anything, and it might be as well the same to you. And on the psychological level, this is often how it feels like. It's like, I am not special. Life exists in multiple facets. I don't really care about myself more than anybody else, and therefore let just everything happen how it always has been. And for a lot of people, this might actually be peace. And there's a truth here that kind of is what the point of existential realization is. And that's why a lot of people who find themselves in this place stop all sort of ambition and all sort of, attachment to worldly things. But there's like a fake version of this where you pretend that you are somehow at peace and that there's nothing that you really want. But there is still this feeling that you want to want something. There's this feeling that there must be something better somewhere still. And maybe not anymore on this like existential truth-seeking layer, but in the personal, real-life layer. Because no matter how much spiritual, psychological, in-depth psychology you do, life keeps going on. And since life keeps going on, you want to manage it well. And managing it well for every person on this planet means the same. And it is a movement towards greater well-being. Consciousness is structured in a way that everybody wants to feel content. This means physically healthy and psychologically healthy, and preferably something that you do that you find enjoyable. If this is missing, then there is no amount of spiritual fantasizing that will change this condition. It might change the relationship that you have to this condition. Like, instead of feeling that you're lacking something, you can be content in that. But to change the condition, you must be able to force or penetrate the boundary that is not letting you go to the next stage. A lot of people who are not as far advanced, but still are very much in the depth of it, they have a lot of repressed anger. And repressed anger is extremely common. Anger is often a layer above shame. And oftentimes anger is also a layer above sadness. And it makes you feel like you're not vulnerable. And it is a good way that you can like defend yourself from this sense that life is unfair. But for a lot of people, the idea of anger is also deeply associated with shame and vulnerability. And therefore, anger is seen as something to hide, something that it makes you look weak, that reveals your ego also in a very shameful or exposing way. Or they're scared that they might actually hurt somebody if they let that anger out. That if they truly feel all of it, then that they might become unpredictable, and the noble thing is to control their emotions, and therefore they shouldn't feel that anger. This is always a mistake, because this anger is controlling you, even in ways that you cannot fathom. It might dampen all your emotional range, and it might dampen your inspiration for what you actually want to accomplish in your own life. Because before you can even get to this level of joy and inspiration for creative work, or the business that you are imagining, or the art you want to create, then there's like this huge layer of repressed anger in between that you must feel first. And who knows how much of this anger might be there, right? If you haven't let yourself be angry for 5 years, then there's a lot of anger there. And oftentimes it feels like it's so much that it's better to not even engage with it. It has then to become a habit to let this anger out somehow. And letting anger out is really about feeling it and not trying to push it away. If you feel like you might get violent, then it is of course useful if you do some sports, or try boxing or anything that lets it out, or you go to a place where you can break things. But a lot of the time, the feeling that if I get myself to this place where I'm that angry, then I become too harmful, and therefore I need to repress it. This oftentimes is fantasy. And if you actually let yourself be angry on purpose, like deliberately, like through meditation or some introspection, or you just notice the anger rise and then focus on it deliberately, most likely you will find the gap between acting out the anger and feeling the anger. And it's just this gap where you have to stay in. You don't have to act on the anger, you just have to feel it. And then, like magic, the body processes the anger by feeling it over time until it is completely gone and there's no unconscious or subconscious anger within your own mind. And now you can actually be violent. You can be aggressive. You can be assertive. You can tell others what you want. You can tell others what you don't want. And you can put your ground to where it matters. This is a tenet of self-respect, and it is a tenet of all spiritual realization. There is no freedom if you cannot assert your own boundaries. On the deepest existential layer, think about God as somebody who also allows and accepts violence. If he didn't, then this world wouldn't be what it is. You wouldn't have a place where all of it is accepted and allowed for, meaning that animals eat other animals, and human violence is part of their freedom. If you judge being violent as something inherently bad that you should never allow, then you will always have a split in your own psyche. You will never completely own your own humanity, which has been built by blood, sweat, and tears of raw violence. All rejection of this is denial of reality. Reality is also, to a big part, a violent place. Because if you cannot have boundaries between things, then no material can exist in the first place. You need boundaries to create forms. You need boundaries in order to create conflict and stories and interest. Without boundaries, there's no violence. With no violence, there are no differences. With no differences, you cannot have a world at all. If you do not allow the violence within yourself, you do not allow you do not allow yourself to see the violence that is already there in place, completely fine, exactly like it is. Now, for sure, there are a ton of good reasons to not actually act out that violence in a non-consensual space in society. First of all, you are just hurting yourself. If you understand that reality is one system, causing unnecessary harm to that system is literally like a self-inflicted wound. In a way, you might say that when you hurt another being and you don't understand universal oneness, you are hurting yourself, and therefore everything that is evil is ignorance towards you hurting yourself. This would be a way to envision a sort of universal morality that basically is predicated on some sort of, you might say, egotism, because at the end you can boil it all down to be yourself, but it is kind of an unfair framing because it is not really yourself in some real metaphysical sense, because there is no self. But here we can go into a detour that I'll cover or explain deeper in a different video. And then on the other hand, if you completely see how violence is allowed for in like some cosmical sense, then you might wonder, okay, but then ethically, you just gave me a reason why we shouldn't actually follow through with it. So what is it? Am I allowed to be violent, or am I not allowed to be violent? Is my aggression okay, or isn't it okay? And on the like human societal layer, I just gave you the reason why it's just not sensical to do so. But if you don't fully are committed to oneness, or if you say, no, I understand oneness, but I still want to act out my violent fantasies, well, the matter of fact is that you're free to do so, right? Like that's how this world works. That's why there are prisons where people get put behind bars if they act out their violent fantasies. So if the real fear is, what if I become actually aggressive towards others, well, you're likely going to get fined, and in worst case going to jail. If you are just concerned over your own well-being, then these are the consequences. But if the fear is that you're free to do so, well, you are free to do so. That's the entire point. That's the problem, so to say, why you are repressing it, because you're not actually accepting your own freedom. You're not accepting the freedom that reality allows for, but it's always there. And all you can do is deny it or see it through.